Good morning. I'm Dr. Chrysoulaki, head of the 26th Division of Archaeology of the Ministry of Culture for Piraeus and the islands of Saronic. And I'm very glad to be here with you today, but I have to give you some information about the excavation that places in Greek, hoping that there is a translation simultaneously. So, μπορώ να έχω το επόμενο. Από την άποψη της...
If we look at the ancient landscape and how the topography was set out at that time, we are now at 6 kilometers to the south of the Acropolis. To the west we have Piraeus, so it's around 7 kilometers from here. So let us imagine that we have a big urban triangle which starts from the sacred rock to the sea at Phaleron and to the port of Piraeus at the 5th century BC. We started excavating here on the occasion of the sports center which was going to be constructed here, and we excavated here for about a year from 2011 to 2012. And I'll just show you a few pictures because we don't have very much time. But where you have the pool now, we found a road which dates back to the Archaic period, which is what we call the Proto-Attic period, which includes the 7th century BC, which is the era of the tyrants. So it was paved with small and mid-sized stones set on the soil, and it crossed over a small river. So we found the remains of the bridge, and around it what we found were workshops. If you take a look at the next slide, you'll see that between these workshops we found a well, and it had a stone entrance. It was built during the classical period, and it was in use until the Hellenistic period, which means from 500 BC to 323 BC. And if you look, it is inscribed, and it also has a small asterisk-shaped form, which showed the people putting in the clay rings exactly how they should place them to cover the sides of the wall. After the end of the first year of excavations, and once the construction work actually started where we are today, the archaeological teams moved to the area where the mound and the channel will be constructed. You saw that yesterday, and we started excavating in April 2012, and we are continuing to excavate to date. Around this area we found a cemetery of the Archaic period. It's a cemetery which, as I said, dates to the Proto-Attic Archaic cemetery, which means from the 6th and 7th century BC, and it is still in use during the classical period, and it's also used very little during the Hellenistic period. So it's a cemetery that covers around a period of around 200 years. As you can see on our slides, it is a very ordinary cemetery. It was probably used to cover the needs of the local villages and settlements, and the graves that we found were of different types. For example, we had funeral pyres, we had pit graves, and we also had pot burials, which we'll see later on. So this is an overview of the cemetery, and you see the density because it was a very densely populated both in depth and at length. It's a very deep cemetery, which is over 1.5 to 2 meters, which is what we've excavated to date, and we might find that it goes even deeper. And if you take a look at the next slide, you'll see that these graves do not all have the same orientation, which means they're not all facing north-south or east-to-west or vice versa, and they are intersposed. So if you look at the skeleton that we've uncovered there, you'll see that in the sand they have dug a grave, and in that they have put the dead body. You can't see the grave today because it's now a sandy pit, but on top of that you'll see that there is a pot burial of a small child. Because of the size of the bones, we know it was a small child. Now if you look at the ceramic fragments, we have found nothing to surprise us there. It is of the Attica and Corinth workshops. Some of these pots are very interesting, and you see the one with the wheel and the spokes on it. It's a big pot, and it probably represents one of the noble families of Athens. But looking at these pots, you know, there are some are small pots, some are amphorae, some are just the pots they used to bury children in at that time. You also have the smaller offerings and votive offerings as well, not just burial offerings, with honey or whatever they wanted to accompany their children in the afterlife. So they would place, together with the body of the child, these offerings with the honey or whatever in the pot where they were all buried. So these are the offerings that we found that date back to the 5th century classical era, before we saw the previous era. And what you find designed on them is something rather ordinary, nothing to surprise us. What we did is that we also studied while excavating not just the archaeological dimension, but also the sociological and anthropological dimension of what we uncover. And in fact, we go into forensics quite deeply. This is a skeleton which will give us quite specific information, and as we have uncovered so many dead bodies, because we have around 600 graves uncovered, we will be able to draw curves and see what population, what kind of population we're talking about, what their nutrition was like, what diseases attacked them. So in this particular one, you see that they lacked vitamin C, because you see that because of the deficiency, the skeleton is somewhat rubbed out. And you also see that there were people who did hard labor because their bones have lots of fatigue lesions, fatigue-provoked lesions. So if we move to the next slide. Now over these graves, and when I say over, I'm talking about something that it's around 10 to 20 centimeters over these graves. At certain sections of the cemetery, we find some out of the ordinary graves, which means that these were in fact burials with no graves. People were just left there without being buried, and this is quite unusual for that time. And you can see that the skeletons seems, well, a lot of them are found with manacles, and some have been beaten up considerably, and because they haven't got any offerings with them, we can't be absolutely certain about the dates of burial, but we know that it's very close to the archaic pottery, so that gives us a basis for our calculations. But the forensic work in our labs will give us more data to use. later on. This lab analysis, which is carried out with the assistance of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, who have been helping us along this long-term and difficult excavation, not because of what we have uncovered. It's not a cemetery that's out of ordinary, and apart from these skeletons of these people who were manacled, I don't consider it in any other way extraordinary. You know, archaic cemeteries have been found in other places in Greece. But the specificity of this excavation, what has been surprising, and which is due to our cooperation with the foundation, is the amount of research and analysis we've been doing, because it will give us a lot more information and knowledge than just going to a museum and seeing all of these behind screens, because this research will be financed and it will give us information, scientific information, because it's archaeology combined with other sciences, and it will give us the possibility to understand the everyday life and the type of population, the gender of people, their age, what kind of lives they led, which means man is at the center of this excavation. So we look at the people who were buried there and not just the offerings that accompanied them to the afterlife. And we did it for man, because man is what we would like to study. In our next slide you see the teams, the excavation team and the conservation team, who will be accompanying you on the tour you take around the site. I'd like to thank you for your patience, and I'd like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for their very important support. Thank you.